Once upon a time, tenant farmer Thomas Ranard lived at Wheelsby Manor, said to be representative of the original thatched farmhouse that had stood there for centuries. Then, in 1888, Edward Heneage put the Wheelsby estate up for sale, and Ranard's modest whitewashed manor house made way for what historian C. Ernest Watson rather sniffily described in 1901 as a pretentious mansion. George Slight's new home was certainly much grander than the old manor house, but it's unlikely that anyone who knew George would have described him as pretentious. His home was much bigger by necessity, to house his still-growing family and no doubt generations of the Slight family to come, and it was built to last using the very best materials that his hard-earned fortune could buy. It has been said that George's decision to name his new home Wheelsby Hall caused a bit of a nightmare for Grimsby's postman, but it wasn't all his fault. For 90 years the splendid Georgian residence across the fields from Wheelsby Hall had always been known as Wheelsby House. Built by the Thorold family, it was made even more splendid by Alexander Grant Thorold when he added the stable block in 1865. However, when Alexander and his family moved to London in 1892 and the highly successful brewer William Taylor Hewitt took up residence, reports in the newspapers show that it quickly became unofficially known as Wheelsby Old Hall, whilst George's residence was occasionally called Wheelsby New Hall. It has been suggested that the Hewitts didn't want their mere house to be upstaged by a hall, but being a house never did the likes of Osborne, Chatsworth and Belton any harm. Perhaps the change was made for more practical reasons in an attempt to avoid confusion, but it didn't work. Both names continued to be used, and it wasn't until 1905 that the name Wheelsby Old Hall finally replaced Wheelsby House as the official residence of William's son, Mr. Thomas William Good Hewitt, on the electoral rolls. But even then, his gardener Fred Fleming's abode was described as Wheelsby House Gardens, with his coachman Thomas Hall residing in Wheelsby House Stables. The press didn't help by continuing to mix up the names. For example, in 1904, they described carol singers visiting both Wheelsby Old Hall and Wheelsby House, and in 1908 referred to Mr. T.W.G. Hewitt of Wheelsby Hall and Mr. G.F. Slight of Wheelsby House when reporting on an attack on their horses in the fields between the two halls. Even after Wheelsby Old Hall, by then a hospital, was destroyed by incendiary bombs in June 1943, the press continued to mix up the names, and 80 years later, our researchers are still suffering for it as they troll through the newspaper archives. The only upside of the Luftwaffe's destructive strike was for the Wheelsby postman, who, after half a century of wrongly addressed letters, now had only one grand home and the odd over-friendly fox terrier to deal with.